brioche with caramel lime filling, quick espresso versus specialty coffee, and Chiavenesca wine. This week, we're back in Milan.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. If you like food and travel, well, this is the place. Each week, we visit a different foodie city and explore its cuisine, and this week, we're back in Milan with foodie guide and writer Jackie DeGiorgio. But first, if you like the podcast, be sure and rate and review us on your podcast app. It's a quick little thing you can do to help us get noticed by more foodie travelers just like you. Jackie DeGiorgio is back after her appearance on the podcast last week. If you missed that show, you can hear it at radiomisfits.com/DED251. It was a great show. Jackie told me about gelato and cocktails in Milan. And this week, we're talking coffee culture and the best places to get an espresso, as well as a decadent coffee drink invented in Milan that's surprisingly difficult to find. And to go with your coffee, we're trying some mini pastries and panettone. Plus, Jackie gives me a primer on the local Lombardy wine region. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Jackie DeGiorgio, welcome back to Destination Eat Drink. It's great to have you back on the show again.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
You know, you really... I talked about this last week when you were on the show, and you really opened my eyes about Milan when we sat down and had coffee when Karen and I were visiting your city, and even more so last week as we had more time to sit and kind of discuss the food and the culture of Milan. So thanks for doing that. It was great, and as is my way, we get to talking, and I was like, you know what? There's more stuff I want to talk about. So let's talk about more stuff about Milan. How about that?
That sounds great. Let's get going.
Okay. So
I love talking about Milan. So
you say, think of Milan as an international city, but I'm still going to talk about some things that are distinctly Italian culture. And one of those is coffee culture, because when I go to Italy, I know I'm going to be drinking coffee. I know I'm going to be loving coffee. I know I'm going to be just blown away by the baristas and their attention to detail and their love for their craft. So let's talk a little bit about coffee culture. What is it about coffee in Milan?
So what I particularly love about Milan's coffee culture is that I think there's a great mix of the classic places when you think of the typical Italian coffee bar where you go, you get your espresso or cappuccino in the morning, you drink it really quickly, and then go back on your way to whatever you're doing. You go to start your work day or whatnot. But there's also a lot of specialty coffee places that have opened recently, or rather not a lot. I would say a strong handful of places that encourage more of the experience of going and sitting and sipping and taking your time. And at these places, they have, they serve food and you can baked goods or whatnot, and you can just enjoy and sit. And I remember, going to Paris, especially before I moved in Italy, and you kind of have this idea of the Parisian cafe where you can sit and linger for as long as you want. And that wasn't really the way in Italy. Like, sure, as far as I can remember, when I had first moved here, there were places where you go and you have, there's one price at the bar, there's one price when you're sitting inside, and there's another price sitting outside and whatnot. But I feel like now that the idea of having a coffee and sitting and lingering is much more encouraged and much more mainstream. And I love that.
Yeah, because Milan has that reputation of go, go, go. And in so many places in Italy, it's like at the bar, there's not even a place to sit. There's a little bar underneath where you can kind of prop your foot up on, but that's about it. It's like, have your espresso, be on your way. And that's, for good reason. You're you're doing this on your way to work, or you're doing this on a short break from work or whatever. What are some of these places where you like to go and linger over a cup?
I love Pave, which that opened in 2012, and it was a game changer for Milan. When I'd moved to Italy, it had been open for a year. And what's interesting about this place, if you go in there, you could be anywhere. You could be in Brooklyn, you could be in Berlin, you could be in Melbourne. It doesn't have that particular charm of an old school Italian coffee shop. It has more of a contemporary charm. And they have a laboratory as well where they do a lot of baking. So it has some of the best baked goods in the city. So what I love about it is you go, and sometimes, especially if you go on the weekend, you're going to have to wait a little bit. There's always a line outside. They take down your name, and then they'll seat you first come, first served. But they have a nice range of coffee drinks. And one thing in particular that I love about them is that they have oat milk. You're seeing that at more coffee shops.
Good.
If you're going there, you would have to have, they have a brioche for which they're really famous, called the 160, which means 160. And it's filled with the amount of jam that I think had been boiled down from 160 grams of fruit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's apricot, the flavor. And it's just, I love having that alongside the cappuccino or whatever I'm having there. And they recently just added a brioche with caramel and lime filling. That was just incredible.
Oh,
so I kind of love how you go there, you find the traditional Italian filling with the apricot, which you're going to find at every spot. But you're not going to find a brioche with a caramel lime filling inside it, which is really cool. You're only going to find that at Pave. So I think that's interesting. Oh, and just to clarify, I should say the brioche in Milan is what Southern Italy calls the cornetto, like the pastry that kind of resembles a croissant.
Right.
In Milan, they call it a brioche.
I want to talk more about pastry in detail, but first I want to go back to the coffee for just a second, because I'm wondering, because when we went to Turin, there's all of these ornate coffee houses. You see some of them in Naples too. All over Italy you see them, but I don't know. I guess I didn't stumble upon too many in Milan. Do they have any of these old school ornate places where you go in and the design is just like, oh, wow.
There's a few the torrefazione, that's when you see that in front of a coffee shop, it means a roaster. So there are a few old school places like that, but they're not as ornate as the ones you would find in Turin with that huge sit-down coffee culture. One place that jumps out for me is Torrefazione Odaida, which was in the neighborhood I used to live in, and it's been there since I believe the 1930s. And it's just so charming and so warm. Like you go in there and there's just a really nice, warm, inviting feeling to it. And what I love about this place, though, is that you get all the traditional coffee drinks, but they're also a bit adapted to contemporary times, and they'll have a matcha latte. They offer drinks for the summer, some special cold drinks like an almond milk flavored coffee or pistachio coffee and whatnot. And they also, in the winter, you can find an interesting drink there, one that's few and far between these days. It's called the barbajada.
Barbajada, yes. I went into a place called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Hodeida, and because I heard they had the barbajada, and I asked for it, and the woman behind the counter started laughing at me. I was like, why? I was like, why? She's like, no, winter only. I was like, oh, okay, but I'm here now. Can't? And she's like, no, we're not making that for you now. And she pointed me to a machine. It looked like a Slurpee machine, and they had this. It's like a coffee slushy thing that they were serving for summer, and it was delicious. It was fabulous, but I still haven't had the Barbayada yet. So where do you can, there are places I can get it year round?
From what I understand, there's a place that's the Torrefazione that you had mentioned, the one in my neighborhood I was talking about, the Odaida, where they have the
Okay.
it's so yeah, it's a tricky name to say, yes. But I'm glad that you went there. I love that place. Well, it's in my old neighborhood now. I love it. They have a whole bunch of teas and it's really I think they did a nice job of keeping their original charm, but being able to meet all the different contemporary tastes and preferences. There is a place called Vergani. There's one near Porto Romana, and there's a few other throughout the city, and they're said to have the Barbayada year round. And Pave, well, I think you should have it in the winter as well.
We haven't even said, what is a Baba How is it made? What is in it?
So that is sort of, it's a hot chocolate drink, but it also has coffee in it, and it's topped with whipped cream. And you can find, that's pretty much the drink in its most basic form. At Torrefazione Odaida, they add rum to it. And it's a drink that dates back. Yeah.
You're making me regret even more than I wanted.
You just have to come back in the winter.
Yeah.
But it's a drink that's it's actually pretty cool because the drink itself has DECO status, which is denominazione comunale, or communal denomination, because it's a drink, or it's a food, or a gastronomic product that's considered integral to the culinary culture of the city. Other dishes in Milan that have that are the risotto alla milanese, the costoletta, the mondeghili, which are meatballs, fried beef meatballs. So it's cool that this drink has earned that recognition. It dates back to the early mid 1800s. There was a man named Domenico Barbaia, and he worked at a cafe called Caffè dei Virtuosi, which was next to La Scala. And there's so many different stories out there. Some people say he invented the drink himself. Some people say he was the manager and one of his staff members created this drink. But whatever the case, there was this Caffè dei Virtuosi where the drink was created, and he is tied to it, and the drink is named for him. And it was wildly popular for, until the 1930s, and then it started to fizzle out. So it's kind of a shame that it's so few and far between in Milan. It's really hard to find. There are some chefs, though, who, like the chef Davide Odani, whose restaurant Dough is outside of Milan. It's in the province of Milan, but not in the city center. And he has a dessert version of it.
Oh, wow.
And then I recently... Yeah, it's supposed to be great. I haven't been to that restaurant in years, but next time I go, I have to try that. And there's a restaurant I went to recently called Mana, where they had, the affogato, which is the typical Italian drink where you flood a scoop of ice cream with an espresso. Mm-hmm. Well, they offered a pistachio barbayada. So they sort of flooded a scoop of pistachio ice cream with a barbayada. And I thought that was cool.
That is awesome. I kind of fell into a rabbit hole on this guy, Barbaia, who maybe invented it, maybe one of his employees did. That guy has a fascinating history. Like, he ran La Scala, he got rich off of making these these drinks, running these coffee houses, and he parlayed that money into becoming like this. He made all kinds of money. And one thing that he did was, apparently he ran La Scala for a while and ran the gambling operation, because in La Scala, they had like a casino in the foyer when it first opened. So this guy is like, he's not just inventing coffee drinks, man. He's got people gambling. He's lining his pockets with all kinds of money. And apparently at one point he was also basically an arms dealer during the Napoleonic Wars. At least that's what my research uncovered about this guy. Really fascinating.
It is. He was a hustler. And you're right. I've read all this stuff too. And I know when he was done with Milan, he went to Naples, and he just sort of lived as this, he became this opera impresario. Some say the most impressive of all time, if not the most impressive in Italy. He has a really fascinating story. He'd make an interesting biography topic, I think.
Yeah, it would make a great movie, I think.
Yeah.
We'll film it in Milan. We'll film it in Naples. I think he was in Vienna maybe for a while.
He was. You're right. You were absolutely right about that. Yes.
So fun. Well, let's talk about one of my favorite topics, which is pastries. And man, we went to some great pastry shops when we were there. I think one of my favorites was Marchese 1824. That place was great. We went to a place called I Nomura, which I really liked a lot. It looked like it was an old husband and wife team working in there. Those were a couple of my favorite places. But what places do you like to go to, Jack? Oh, well, first of all, do you like those two places that I mentioned?
Yes, I absolutely love both of those places. Marchese is just a classic, and I know I went there for the first time before I even lived in Milan. And I Dolci Namora is close to where I used to live, so some mornings I would pop in there for a cappuccino or a brioche in the day. So those are excellent spots. And other places I love, obviously there was Pave that I was talking about. I love Martesana, where we met for the coffee.
Yes, that place was great.
There's a lovely pastry shop called Officini del Dolce, which is on Corso Lodi. It's in the southern part of Milan, and they do a lot of gluten-free pastries there. And I think this place is worth mentioning because it's not far from the Fondazione Prada or the Prada Foundation. So I think it warrants a visit if anyone's going to the Prada Foundation and is just looking for a quick bite after nearby. There's a place I love. It's not quite a bakery proper. It's sort of one of those places right now that there's a lot of places that have been opening that sort of wear many hats. They do breakfast, they do lunch, they do an aperitivo, they have natural wines. And so one of them I love is called Serra del Quartiere on Via Melzo. And another great place to go is L'Oste Cafe, which is kind of in the Risorgimento neighborhood. Those are places that do pastries and other sorts of food as well, and specialty coffee. Oh, and Marathon, the Pasticceria Marathon, which is around the Risorgimento neighborhood. Those are all great places, and I'm sure there's plenty more as well that I'm missing, but those are all some of my favorites.
One trend that I've noticed, I've really noticed it everywhere, this trend of mini pastries, but especially in Milan. I mean, in Lisbon, you can get mini pastel de natas and stuff like that. But in Milan, it seemed like all of these places, there's tons and tons of choices of these mini pastries. And I really like this because if you just get a little one, I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, I don't consume as many calories. For me, I look at it and I go, well, I can get 3 of them now, and I can try 3 different mini things. A little tiramisu and a little, cheesecake tart and a little, maybe a little chocolate truffle. And to me, that makes life much, much better. Have you noticed this trend of mini pastries?
Yes, and I agree with you. 100%. That's what I love about that is, especially when I want different things, because I have such a sweet tooth, but like the place where we went to Martesana, what I love about that is, we had the canoncino, which is what Karen had. I had the mini tiramisu, and you had the that little pistachio dish, yes, but the little pistachio pastry.
Always pistachio with me.
But I agree. I love what I especially love though is when the places like Martesana has, and I didn't have it that day, when they had a tiny little soccer tort pastry, because that's one of my favorite sweets in Milan, the soccer tart, which originated in Vienna, but it's very popular in Milan because it reflects the time when Milan was under Austrian rule. So nowadays that sweet is just as Milanese as the risotto. So it's something that I love, and it's so rich. So I love that I can just go get a tiny little portion of it and get my fill instead of having to buy an entire cake of it, or even an entire slice, which can be a little, but still big.
What is it exactly?
Oh, so it is chocolate cake with a tiny thin layer of apricot jam, and then it's covered in chocolate fondant.
Oh, man. Oh, jeez. Yeah. Apricot and chocolate is so good together. Oh, man.
It's pretty dreamy, yes.
You mentioned the cannoncini, and
Mhm.
describe that because I wasn't familiar with that until we got to Milan.
So that's a lovely little treat. It's sort of a cylinder puff pastry that's filled with cream, and then the end of it is dipped into one end is dipped into like a sponge cake, and that's nicknamed the cannolo of the North because it's so typical. It originated in Piedmont, but there's so much overlap between the Milan and even the Lombard culinary traditions and Piemonte. So it's pretty much a signature sweet of Milan, and it's one of those sweets that's very popular on a Sunday afternoon. It's something you will always find at someone's house if you're going there for Sunday lunch. They will either have a tray of it, or you might bring that to them as the guest.
Before we get off of pastries, I did want to mention the panettone because that originated in Milan, and this is now famous worldwide. I mean, we used to get them in the U.S. all the time, but for me, the thing about I would see the panettone in the windows of the Milanese pastelerias, and they're the artisan ones are like 42 euros, and they're huge. They're like a kilo. That's like 2.2 pounds of. I'm like I couldn't consume this in a week. I don't think. Well, maybe I could, but I was just wondering, are there places where you could just get a slice of panettone? Because I didn't see it. I'm sure that places offer it, but I hadn't noticed that.
Yes, pave will definitely have that for sure. If it's not a proper slice, there is, it's a smaller version, like they say in Italian, a monoporzione, like a single portion of it, a miniature version.
Minis again, yeah.
Yes, yes. The Vergani, which I mentioned before, where they do the barbagliata, they always have panettone year-round by the slice. And there's another place, Pasticceria San Gregorio, near Porta Venezia, that has panettone year-round by the slice as well. You're seeing it more and more because it really is the signature sweet of the city, and a lot of places are just like, why are we limiting this to Christmas time?
Yeah, you can do it year-round, and I love panettone. I love it especially like grilled. Or toasted. That's my favorite way to have panettone. It's so good, and I'll bet someone in Milan is serving it with a side of apricot jam because you got to have apricot jam, right?
I'm sure someone does. Yes.
You let me know. Send me a picture when you find it, because I know it's somewhere in Milan. Somebody's done it.
I will.
Let's talk a little bit about wine, because in the last episode we talked a lot about cocktails. I think of cities. Sometimes I put cities into categories like there are beer cities and there are wine cities, and then I think of Milan as like more of a cocktail city. But you said last week that wine is definitely becoming more and more popular in Milan, especially natural wine. Expand on that idea a little bit, if you could, Jackie.
Something happened over the last few years. Like the natural wine scene has just exploded here. And don't get me wrong, there are places, for instance, the restaurant Pasta Madre in Porto Romana. I believe that opened in 2012, and the owner and chef, he's had an all natural wine list since it opened. And there's a place that opened on the Navigli in 2014 called Vin Noir, and that was one of the first natural wine bars in the city. It's all natural wine, and now they have a cucina or a kitchen, so you can go there and have a proper meal with the natural wine. But something just happened, maybe starting in 2016 or 2017, just all of these natural wine bars started opening, and they've really shifted the city's aperitivo culture. As I had mentioned before, a lot of the Milanese have decided to go to these places to have their aperitivo, and instead of getting an €8 cocktail with the buffet of free food, they buy a bottle of wine and pay for their food and have really great, salame or crostone to go along with it. Some of these wine bars aren't equipped with a proper kitchen, so it's usually pre-prepared food, but they're really just, they've completely expanded and shifted the city's aperitivo culture. And I always say it's a must experience in Milan, a natural wine aperitivo.
I'm so fixated, I guess, on the Piedmont region when it comes to wines because, Barolo is my all-time favorite varietal. But I'm just wondering, are there Lombardy region wines that we should think about when we come there? Because I always want to try the local wine. And I'm wondering if there's something from your region that we should be getting when we come to Milan.
Absolutely, yes. So let's start in the north. If you go up to Valtellina in the Alps there are the Nebbiolo grape thrives there. And a lot of winemakers, they make Nebbiolo wines in Valtellina, and a lot of them use the local dialect term for it, which is Chiavanesca. But the grape there, it's different than Piemonte, but it does its own thing. I would also suggest the wines of Franciacorta, which are sparkling wines made using the classic method. They're located about an hour outside of Milan. And then south of Milan is the Oltrepo Pavese, which is a region near Pavia. It literally means like beyond the Po River, Oltrepo. And there's excellent winemakers there where they're doing interesting things with Pinot Noir. Some are making sparkling classic method wines and others are making the more traditional reds. And also there's a lot of great Rieslings coming from that area as well.
Before we let you go, Jackie, I just, folks who are going to come to Milan, and they definitely should, are probably going to do more than eating and drinking. Although I don't know who these people are, but they're going to want to go and do some sightseeing. They're going to want to see some attractions. And of course, they're going to go probably to the Duomo, the cathedral. They're probably going to want to go see the Last Supper. And these types of things, they're very well known, the Leonardo da Vinci Museum. But do you have any recommendations for other places, maybe even off the beaten path places that people should see when they come to Milan?
Yes. So I would definitely recommend, this place does get some press and you might find it in some guidebooks, but it's highly recommended, the Villa Necchi Campiglio. I know that it's gotten some press before. It does show up in I would say it's not in every must visit Milan, and it's not in every list of things to do in Milan, but the people who really know Milan will suggest this. It's this incredible mansion in the city center built in the 1930s that has it's just this design masterpiece. The original architect was Piero Portolupi, who is I would say he is to Milan what Haussmann is to Paris, except his architecture is much more discreet. You kind of have to know where to find it. And it's just this design masterpiece. And it's actually been used as the backdrop of certain films, one being Io sono l'amore, or I Am Love, with Tilda Swinton's in it. It was directed by Luca Guadagnino. And it's just spectacular. And I think it really, how Milan is such a design mecca. So I think it's an important must-see for anyone visiting town. There are some really quirky spots as well. One being there's a Hollywood Walk of Fame from the 90s that started as it started as an initiative and then it was completely abandoned. But if you go there and look at it, it's not far from the Duomo and you really have to know it's there. It's pretty much hidden in plain sight. But there are the handprints of, think of people from the 80s and 90s like Patrick Swayze, the Beverly Hills 90210 cast like Shannon Doherty and Luke Perry. Sylvester Stallone has his handprints there. Raquel Welch. It's
awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, not a lot of people know about it, but I think that it's really it's cool. It's fun to see. For something really European, I would suggest in Piazza Santo Stefano. the church is called San Bernardino alle Osse, and it has an ossuary attached to it. So when a local, this back hundreds of years, it dates back to the 1200s actually, a local cemetery got full, so they just decided to put the bones on display in an ossuary. When you walk into the church, it's to the right, and it's kind of cool to see because it's something that's so European that you're not going to see in America. It's also kind of morbid as well. A couple of times I popped in, of course I went to see it the first time I came to Milan, and I brought guests to see it, but I never take pictures or video it because I just feel like it's kind of disrespectful to the dead in there.
The only other thing I would say is don't go on Sunday because they do have services in the church and the ossuary is closed on Sunday.
Thank you for that. Yes, that is very true. Yes. I also just love walking around and looking at the architecture. There's so many spectacular details in the design. Like there's one building on Corso Venezia. I believe it's Corso Venezia 22. That's the address of it. But the iron gate is sort of sculpted into ropes, and it just looks so cool. The advice I always give people when you're there, I think you really just need to keep your eyes open and look up and just really look at the details. Because I mean, that's how the city really won me over, and it won over a lot of other people that I know too, because it's not in your face like Rome, Venice, and Florence. You really have to look and take the time and get to know the city. And I think that's one of the best ways to do so.
Great advice, Jackie. Well, Jackie DeGiorgio, thank you so much for being back on Destination Eat Drink. If folks want to get in touch with you to book a private tour or to check out your writing, where can they find you?
I have a blog called A Signorina in Milan. .com, and you can find my writing on there as well as my contact info, because I do offer food tours in Milan. So if anyone's coming to Milan and would like a food tour, I'd be happy to accommodate you. So yeah, please feel free to get in touch with me.
Yeah, and Jackie knows all the places. I'm here to testify firsthand. She knows all the places in Milan, and her blog is very entertaining as well. Well, Jackie, thanks so much for being on Destination Eat Drink. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So much fun, and thanks for taking the time today.
And thank you so much for taking the time. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm so honored to be a guest on your show. So thank you so much, Brent.
Okay. That's Milan with Jackie. What a great conversation about a city that's a little hard to understand at first, but is truly worth visiting. And Jackie is a delightful person. You know, a lot of my guests I only get to talk to over Zoom. Some of them I've had the pleasure of meeting in person, but a lot of them I don't, just because of the distances involved in the travel. But Jackie and I and Karen sat down and had a coffee and some pastries, and I can tell you, she's just a delightful, wonderful person. You can connect with Jackie at asignorainmilan.com. I've also got a link to Jackie's site, as well as the places she talked about in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED252. Well, that'll put a bow on this show. Next week, we're talking soup. After all, weather's cooling down. It's going to be October, so let's take the chill off with a reboiled soup from Florence, pho from Vietnam, a hangover cure in Colombia, and much, much more. Don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a story about the famous and opulent church in Portugal called the Jeronimos Monastery. Get that at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. I also just posted a brand new video, and speaking of Milan, it's a video about The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci in Milan, plus some of my favorite foodie recommendations in the city. You can get that by going to destinationeatdrink.com and clicking on the video tab, or by going to YouTube at Destination Eat Drink 946. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I will see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.